Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Medisodes. I'm here again with Surya, Adrian, and Shrey, and this week we're going to be talking about the common cold. It's a very prevalent condition, and it's something that has affected everyone, no matter age, race, or gender. So, what is the common cold? It's the most common human disease, affecting people across the globe. It's estimated that adults will be infected by around 2 to 3 times annually, and for children it's even higher, up to 6 to 10 times. And in certain cases for school children, it can go as high as 12 times a year. This obviously has a huge economic and social impact, which is not properly understood, but it's said in the US to cause 100 million physician visits annually, which then costs an estimate of around $7.7 billion. And more than 1/3 of these people receive antibiotic prescription medicines, which again ties into a larger problem of antibiotic resistance. Further impacts are 22 to 189 million school days missed annually, and the global economic impact is estimated to be $20 billion per year. Now, the cold is a condition that has affected humanity for centuries. In fact, some symptoms and treatment for the disease has been documented as early as the 16th century BCE in the Ebers Papyrus from ancient Egypt, the oldest medical text known to man. The name cold has come about due to its similarity between its symptoms and the symptoms of cold weather exposure. The cause was first identified in the 1950s, and while many think that cold weather can cause the disease, it's actually caused by viruses, non-living organisms, and there are 200 different strains linked to causing the common cold. Rhinoviruses are the most common of these. They spread via air and close contact, as well as indirectly by living on surfaces. And of course, the biggest thing about the common cold is that there is no vaccine or cure currently available worldwide. Its symptoms, however, can be treated by multiple ways. In today's talk, we're going to be discussing why is the common cold so prevalent, what certain treatments could be for it, and its overall effects on society. So next will be Shrey talking about what makes the common cold so common.
So as Anupam said before, people are routinely affected with the common cold multiple times a year. So many of you might be wondering, why don't we just develop immunity to the common cold? Well, the main reason for this is the fact there are so many different strains of the common cold, nearly 200, as Anupam was saying. And this means that the immune system has to respond to it every time, and it doesn't build up memory lymphocytes against the common cold. Also, many people are asymptomatic to the cold while still transmitting it. And this means that people don't realize that they got it and that they're spreading it. 20% of those who are infected with a common cold are asymptomatic and don't display any of the symptoms associated with the common cold. But it's important to note that the virus itself does not cause the symptoms of the common cold. The symptoms you get, such as a runny nose, sore throat, are actually the immune system's response to the common cold. So you may have heard that people say, oh, I never get the common cold because our immune system is so strong. But actually, stronger immune systems are linked to having worse cold symptoms because your body is reacting much more vigorously to viral infection. While rhinoviruses are the main source of the common cold, there are also many other classes of viruses. You may have heard of this thing called the coronavirus. Well, this is actually a type of cold virus, and COVID-19 just happens to be a much more lethal version of that. Although it's important to stress that COVID-19 is not the same as the common cold. And this shows the really big spectrum within biology. One member of a family causes a common cold, while another causes a global pandemic. Viruses settle on surfaces such as doorknobs, tables, stuff like that. And that means that if someone infected with the cold were to touch these, the cold virus would be transmitted to that. And the cold virus can live on these surfaces for many hours. So if someone else comes along and touches that and then touches their nose, mouth, eyes, they can also get infected. And without proper hygiene being enforced, this could be a real problem. It's also important to note the difference between flu and the cold. Flu is caused by the influenza virus, and it's a much more serious condition than the cold. The cold is unlikely to kill you unless you're already immunocompromised. Now, many of you might be thinking, why haven't we thought of a way to treat the cold? And Adrian's coming up next to talk about that.
To understand why we have not yet cured the common cold, we must first understand how the body detects and recognizes viruses and, indeed, other foreign pathogens in the body. An antigen is any substance that causes the immune system to produce antibodies against it. This means that your immune system does not recognize this substance and is trying to fight it off. An antigen may be a substance from the environment, such as chemicals, bacteria, viruses, or pollen. Antigens may also form inside the body. This attacking of antigens by the immune system is the reason behind the rejection of organ transplants. The body recognizes the antigens on the surface of the transplanted organ as foreign, and thus attacks this organ with antibodies. What are antibodies? Antibodies, also known as immunoglobulin, are large Y-shaped proteins that are used by the immune system to identify and neutralize unrecognized antigens. Working in a way that is similar to the lock and key theory of enzyme action, antibodies are custom made for the antigen they are going to attack. This is done by a type of white blood cell called a B lymphocyte, and this is why antibodies are a crucial part of the so-called adaptive immune system. Much like how a lock will only fit one type of key, the antibody will only work for that specific antigen. The first time an antigen is introduced into the body, B lymphocytes will take some time to produce the antibody for that antigen, because the body has never seen it before, and so it takes time to produce antibodies specific to that antigen to be made. It's comparable to a learning curve. As such, it is in this period of time that the invading pathogen thrives in the body, and, in the case of the common cold, leads to symptoms such as coughing, a sore throat, and a runny nose. In fact, these symptoms are not a direct effect of the virus. Instead, they are induced by the body as a way of getting rid of the virus. For example, the virus does not cause a runny nose. The body is getting rid of the excess mucus that has been formed to trap as much of the virus as possible. But once B lymphocytes have learned how to produce antibodies, they can be produced quickly, and the pathogen is slowly removed from the body. Once the pathogen has been eliminated from the body, however, the body retains a type of B lymphocyte called a memory B cell that remain in the blood. These cells are aptly named. They retain the information of how to produce the antibodies for that specific antigen so that, in the event that the same pathogen invades the body again, the immune response to produce antibodies is extremely quick and effective, often eliminating the pathogen before the person experiences any symptoms. So, from this, it would seem a reasonable assumption to make that, once a person has been infected, they probably will not experience the symptoms for that particular communicable disease again, because the body will know how to fight the pathogen before any symptoms develop. Indeed, this is true in the case of some diseases, such as chickenpox, measles, and glandular fever. Of course, every person is different, so it is not impossible to get these diseases more than once, but it is very rare. What is not rare, however, is catching a cold more than once. What is it about the common cold virus that means the body cannot build up resistance against it, as it does with other diseases? The problem is that more than 200 different viruses are known to cause a symptom. Though you may be experiencing the same common cold symptoms time and time again, it is most likely a different virus each time that is causing them. But does this mean that if a person has had about 200 colds, then they will not get a cold again? The short answer is no. Studies have found that multiple viruses are known to cause a common cold simultaneously, and this means that they exchange genetic information inside human cells. This leads to genetic information in new viruses produced by reproduction being slightly different, which could lead to different antigens on its surface, and so yet another antigen type for which the body is susceptible to attack. Furthermore, gene mutations also lead to change in antigen structure. Even a change in a single base in the genome could lead to the proteins making up the antigens folding up differently, and so the body cannot use the antibodies it has used before. The processes of gene mutations and gene swapping happen rapidly and produce many variants of each of those 200 odd viruses, and the body has to produce different antibodies for each of those variants. This means that it is unlikely that humans will ever develop immunity to the common cold on their own. The dynamic nature of the viruses is the reason why we have not cured it yet. Since the viruses that cause the common cold are constantly changing, it is extremely hard to develop a treatment that will effectively cure all the viruses that cause the common cold. The medicines that work for the viruses currently known can be developed. This is not the cure we are aiming for, since they may not be effective against any changes in the virus structure. There are some alleged cold remedies that are sold at supermarkets and pharmacies, but they do nothing to eliminate the virus from the body, but instead try to alleviate the symptoms which, ironically, can extend the time the virus is present in the body. But they do reduce the discomfort caused by symptoms, which is the ultimate aim of these remedies, not to cure the common cold.
So, now we're going to be talking about if the common cold is curable. Unfortunately, there is no vaccines available that can help prevent the development of common cold. However, the NHS believe that common cold can be self-treated at home without having to visit the GP, and that symptoms will disappear after 1 or 2 weeks. Self-care can include a lot of basic things. Drinking a lot of water is essential when trying to cure the common cold. This is because the body loses a lot of fluid when a person has a cold, and this can lead to dehydration, especially if there is an associated high fever. People with the common cold are also likely to be dehydrated because they tend to lose their appetite and hence may not be regularly eating or drinking, increasing risk of dehydration. Dehydration in itself is a dangerous state that can lead to many problems, such as a high chance of developing kidney stones. Sleeping is also a major aspect of helping to cure the common cold. Sleep helps to cure the common cold by helping boost the immune system. This means that sleep can also help decrease your chances of developing the common cold in the first place. Research has shown that those who sleep for less than 7 hours a night were more than 3 times likely to develop the common cold than those who slept for 8 or more hours. Keeping warm is also another method of helping to fight the common cold. This is because higher temperatures create an optimal temperature for the RNA-seL enzyme. This enzyme is involved in the destruction of viral RNA, such as the RNA of the rhinovirus that causes the common cold. So keeping yourself warm is crucial to helping eliminate the replication of the virus. Now, I would just like to tackle a myth that might be circulating about treatments to common cold. It has been thought that steam inhalation is a cure to the common cold. However, this is simply not the case because the steam just serves to soften the mucus produced. While this can help to reduce congestion and relieve symptoms of a blocked nose, it is not a magic remedy to cure the common cold. Vaccines are the most effective strategies to reduce infectious diseases on a public scale. Despite trying to develop a vaccine for the common cold, as far back as the 1960s, we still have not been able to develop a vaccine for the common cold. One of the biggest barriers to this is the fact that there are over 200 different viruses that can cause the common cold, as mentioned before, meaning that there would be a lot of antigens to target. However, advances in technology could mean that 70 to 80 of the most common viruses that cause the common cold could be targeted in one single vaccine, much like how the pneumonia vaccine, which targets 23 different viruses, works very effectively. So hopefully in the future we can have vaccines that help prevent the development of common cold.
Now, I brought up at the start the economic impact of the cold and how a lot of money is lost across all industries because of people getting the cold and being unable to work. So a big question that's always asked is, should people go into work even though they know they're sick? The cold isn't obviously a virus that causes a lot of death, but do you think it's right that people should go into work or in some cases be forced to work?
So I think this is a question of balancing caring for people's health and keeping the economy going. Because as the name suggests, the common cold is extremely common and a lot of people have it at once, especially in the winter. I don't think it would be viable for the economy to take such a hit every winter if about half the workforce stayed off. So I think it's right that people should still go to work with the cold, considering how mild the symptoms can be in some cases.
As I don't think it's a very complex issue because some people are asymptomatic to the cold. They don't even know they have it. But some people do get very bad symptoms from the cold, either just by their immune system overreacting to it or their immune system being compromised and that causes that to happen, or just by luck. And if you're really, really struggling with the symptoms, I don't think you should be forced to work, because you're not going to be productive and you're just going to spread it to everyone around you. So it's really about managing symptoms, and it's a complex issue and it's got a nuanced responses to it.
Well, I think it's important to understand that the symptoms only last for 1 or 2 weeks, and the GP and NHS suggest that the symptoms only last for 1 or 2 weeks. So I think that it is a really drastic step to make the workforce stop working for such a trivial disease.
Just as a counterpoint to what you guys have said, while I don't disagree with it, what if, and this is proven of course, people coming to work while sick is causing their co-workers to get sick, just exacerbating the problem? Maybe if people weren't societally pressured to come in while sick, there would be less sick people, and that would actually decrease the number of sick days.
Well, I mean, at the moment, there's a perfect case study for this. Obviously, people not going to work at the moment is important because of the fact that COVID-19 is extremely deadly. There's no comparison between common cold and COVID-19. The common cold is extremely unlikely to cause even very serious side effects. So I don't think that even in the name of reducing infection, this can be realistically instated.
So we've discussed the economic impact, but we should also discuss the medical impact as well. Again, near the start, I mentioned that one way people so-called treat the disease is by getting handed antibiotic prescriptions. And obviously this leads into a wider issue of antibiotic resistance. What do you guys think about the state of people trying to cure the cold, whether it be through antibiotics or through other more alternative therapies?
Well, my opinion on using antibiotics to cure the common cold is that I think it's extremely irresponsible. The antibiotics work against bacteria, and the common cold is caused by a virus, so they won't cure the common cold. Given that antibiotic resistance is such an important issue nowadays, with drugs being used up and becoming ineffective much faster than they're developed, I feel that doctors and healthcare professionals should make it a priority to lengthen the lifespan of these antibiotics as much as possible.
So I agree with Adrian, and I think it is really important to emphasize to the public that the common cold can be really cured quickly. Knowing this, it can allow healthcare workers to focus their limited resources on more serious health conditions like pneumonia, where antibiotics could actually potentially work. So I think that spreading awareness about the mildness of this common cold can help conserve the limited resources that the NHS has.
Yeah, I think this issue really stems from a lack of education about antibiotics and what they work against, and many people like going to their GP and demanding antibiotics, and it's really hard for the GPs to say no. And it's got better over the last few years, and GP have just said flat no's to a lot of people as this issue has been raised. But it's really important that there's public awareness that antibiotics have no effect on the common cold.
So we've talked about the cures that don't work, especially antibiotics, and Shri touched on this at the end of his segment. But do we think a cure for a disease that's plagued humanity for centuries will really one day come about? What do you guys think?
Well, as I've mentioned previously, a vaccine has been developed for pneumonia, and the pneumonia vaccine targets 23 different bacteria. So I think that it is possible to target multiple antigens of the common cold viruses. So if the technology permits it, we might be able to look at a common cold virus vaccine in the near future.
I was saying earlier that though vaccines can be developed for the many variants that do exist right now, I think that they would be effective in the short term, but not so much in the long term, because this would lead to natural selection and would lead to the rise of the variants that aren't included in the vaccine. I think the potential for vaccine is an adaptive vaccine that changes inside the body as new variants are made, so that the body is exposed to all possible different antigens.
I just don't think that any significant cure for the common cold is really feasible. Big pharma companies, they're not charities. They're not just doing it for the common good. They're in it to make money. They're in it for the cold, hard profit. And there is simply not enough profit in this sector to be worth it. No one is going to pay like hundreds of pounds just to be cured of the common cold, which probably won't even affect them in terms of symptoms, and it's highly, highly unlikely to even kill them. So I don't see the business sense in doing this. While it's probably scientifically possible, it's unlikely to be financed, and that means it's just unlikely to happen.
Well, I hope that's given everyone the in-depth analysis and description of what the common cold is. And maybe you'll walk away from this video a little more educated about how you can prevent yourself from dealing with the common cold and understanding it more. So this has been Medisodes. We post every single week, and we'd appreciate if you like, comment, and subscribe. And make sure to come back next week for our next video. Thank you for watching.